What happens when a beloved talk show host faces down a royal guest who thinks the rules don't apply to him? In just 37 seconds, one shocking comment turned a friendly interview into the most explosive television moment of the year. The studio lights were bright, the audience was buzzing with excitement, and Jonathan Ross was doing what he does best, making people laugh and feel welcome. His guest tonight was supposed to be a dream interview. Prince Harry, the royal everyone thought they knew, settling into the famous chair across from Jonathan. The crowd applauded as Harry walked out, waving with that signature smile everyone had seen a million times before. Jonathan stood up, shook his hand, and the two sat down. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed like it was going to be just another fun celebrity chat. But within minutes, the temperature in that studio was about to change completely. "Welcome, welcome. So good to have you here," Jonathan said, his voice warm and genuine. The audience clapped again. Harry nodded, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. "Thanks for having me," Harry replied, but there was something in his tone, something that made Jonathan pause for just a second. "So, I've got to say, you've been in the news quite a bit lately," Jonathan continued, keeping things light, keeping things friendly. This was supposed to be easy. This was supposed to be fun. Harry's expression shifted, just slightly. Just enough that if you were watching closely, you'd notice. "Yeah, well, that's what happens when people can't mind their own business," he said. The audience laughed nervously. Was he joking? Jonathan smiled, trying to keep the energy positive. "Well, that's the price of fame, isn't it? We're all curious about you." "Curious," Harry repeated, like the word tasted bad in his mouth. "That's one way to put it." Jonathan shifted in his seat. This wasn't going the way these interviews usually went. Usually, guests played along. They joked. They laughed. They made the audience feel good. But Harry seemed like he had somewhere else he'd rather be. Or maybe he just didn't think he needed to play by the same rules as everyone else. "So tell us," Jonathan said, trying a different approach. "What have you been up to lately? Any fun projects?" Harry shrugged. Actually shrugged. On live television. In front of millions of people. "Not really anything I want to share with this crowd." The air in the studio went cold. You could feel it. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or stay quiet. Jonathan's smile stayed on his face, but his eyes showed something else. Confusion, maybe, or the first hint of frustration. "This crowd?" Jonathan asked, keeping his voice steady. "You mean the people who came here to see you tonight?" "I mean the people who think they deserve to know every detail of my life," Harry shot back. His voice was sharper now, louder. Jonathan took a breath. Stay calm. Stay professional. That's what he'd always done. That's what made him so good at this job. "Well, you did agree to come on the show, mate. Kind of the whole point, isn't it? To chat, to share a bit, to have some fun?" Harry leaned forward. "I agreed to come here because my people told me it would be good for my image, not because I wanted to answer your questions." The audience gasped. Actually gasped. You could hear it ripple through the studio. Jonathan's face changed. The smile was gone now. This was no longer a friendly interview. This was something else entirely. "Right," Jonathan said slowly. "Well, if you didn't want to be here, Harry, you could have just said no. Would have saved us all a lot of time." "Maybe I should have," Harry snapped. "Maybe I should have known this would be a waste of time. Sitting here, pretending to care what you think, pretending like this matters." The studio was dead silent now. Every single person watching, both in the audience and at home, could feel the tension. This wasn't playful banter. This wasn't a bit. This was real, and it was getting ugly fast. Jonathan sat up straighter. "You know what, Harry? I've been doing this job for a long time. I've interviewed hundreds of people. Actors, musicians, politicians, even other royals. and every single one of them understood something very simple. This is a conversation. It's supposed to be respectful. Both ways. Harry laughed. Actually laughed. But it wasn't a nice laugh. It was cold and mocking. Respectful? You make a living asking people invasive questions, and you want to talk to me about respect? Invasive questions? Jonathan's voice was rising now, just a bit. Just enough to show he wasn't going to take this anymore. Mate, I asked you what you've been up to. That's not invasive. That's called being polite. That's called having a normal conversation. Normal, Harry said, shaking his head. Nothing about my life is normal. And you sitting there, acting like we're friends, acting like you have any right to know anything about me, that's not normal either. Jonathan stood up. He actually stood up from his chair. The audience leaned forward. What was happening? What was he going to do? Harry, Jonathan said, his voice firm now. No more jokes. No more trying to smooth things over. I've been nothing but kind to you since you walked out here. I welcomed you. I tried to make this easy. But if you're going to sit in that chair and disrespect me, disrespect this show, and disrespect every single person in this audience who took time out of their lives to be here tonight, then I think we're done. Harry stood up too. The two men faced each other. You think you're done? I'll tell you when we're done. No, Jonathan said, and his voice was like steel now. I won't. This is my show. These are my guests, my audience, my crew, and you don't get to come in here and act like you're above all of it. I am above all of it, Harry said, and the audience gasped again, louder this time. Do you know who I am? Do you know what my family is? You're just a talk show host, Jonathan. You're just a guy who tells jokes for a living. I'm royalty. The words hung in the air like poison. Jonathan's face went red. Not from embarrassment, from anger. Pure, justified anger. Just a talk show host, Jonathan repeated quietly. Just a guy who tells jokes. You know what, Harry? You're right. That's exactly what I am, and I'm proud of it. I work hard. I treat people with respect. I make people laugh. I make people feel good. And I don't go around acting like I'm better than everyone else just because of who my grandmother was. Harry's face twisted. How dare you? How dare I? Jonathan's voice was loud now, filling the entire studio. How dare you? You came on my show. You sat in my chair. And you've done nothing but insult me and everyone here from the moment you opened your mouth. You want to talk about respect? You want to talk about who? Deserves what? You've shown zero respect from the second you walked out here. I don't have to take this from you, Harry said, his voice shaking with rage. You're absolutely right, Jonathan said. You don't. In fact, I think it's time for you to leave. The audience erupted. Some people were clapping. Some people were gasping. Some people just sat there with their mouths open, unable to believe what they were seeing. You're kicking me off? Harry said, his eyes wide. Like he couldn't believe it. Like the idea that someone would actually tell him to leave was completely foreign to him. Yes, Jonathan said simply. I am. This is my show, and I'm asking you to leave. Now. Harry looked around the studio, like he was waiting for someone to step in, to tell Jonathan he couldn't do this, to remind everyone who Harry was and why he should be treated differently. But no one moved. The crew stayed where they were. The audience stayed silent, watching. You can't do this to me, Harry said, but his voice was different now, smaller, like reality was finally starting to sink in. I just did, Jonathan said. Please leave my stage. Harry's face went through about 10 different emotions in 5 seconds. Shock, anger, disbelief, embarrassment, more anger. You'll regret this, he said, pointing at Jonathan. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Jonathan replied, his voice calm again, but still firm. I'm dealing with someone who thought he could come on my show and treat people like garbage because of his last name. Well, your last name doesn't mean anything in this studio. In here, you're just a guest. And guests who can't behave don't get to stay. Harry opened his mouth like he was going to say something else. Something cutting. Something that would make him feel like he'd won. But nothing came out. He stood there, his face red, his hands shaking slightly. "Go on then," Jonathan said, gesturing toward the exit. "Off you go." The audience started clapping. Slowly at first, then louder, then into a full standing ovation. They were clapping for Jonathan. They were clapping because he'd stood up for himself, stood up for them, stood up for basic decency. Harry looked at the audience, at the crew, at Jonathan, and then, finally he turned and walked off the stage. No goodbye, no apology, just walking away, his footsteps echoing in the now quiet studio. Jonathan watched him go, then turned back to face the audience. He took a deep breath, ran his hand through his hair, and tried to smile. The audience was still clapping, still standing, still showing their support. "Well," Jonathan said into his microphone, his voice a bit shaky now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "That was unexpected." The audience laughed. Real laughs this time. Relieved laughs. The tension started to break. "I'm sorry you all had to see that," Jonathan continued. "That's not how I wanted this evening to go. I wanted to have a nice chat, have some laughs, maybe learn something interesting. But sometimes, sometimes people show you who they really are. And when they do, you have to believe them." More applause. Louder now. "I've been in this business a long time," Jonathan said, sitting back down in his chair, trying to get back to normal, trying to salvage what was left of the show. "And I've learned that it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what your title is, or how famous you might be. What matters is how you treat people. That's it. That's the whole thing. And if you can't treat people with basic respect and kindness, then I don't care if you're a prince, or a president, or the biggest movie star in the world. You're not welcome here." The audience erupted again. This time it was different. This wasn't just applause. This was agreement. This was people saying, "Yes, this is right. This is how it should be." Jonathan looked at the camera, right into the lens, speaking directly to everyone watching at home. "I know some of you might think I was too harsh. Some of you might think I should have let it go, should have kept things moving, should have been more professional. But here's the thing. Being professional doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. Being professional means knowing your worth, knowing when to stand up for yourself and the people around you. And that's what I did tonight." He paused, letting the words sink in. This show has always been about having fun, about celebrating people, about making everyone feel welcome and valued. And I will not let anyone, I don't care who they are, turn it into something else. I won't let anyone use this platform to be cruel or condescending or to make others feel small. That's not what we do here. That's not who we are. The applause continued, wave after wave of support from the audience. "So," Jonathan said, his smile returning now, a real smile this time, "we've still got a show to do. We've still got other guests, still got music, still got all the fun stuff we planned. And we're not going to let one person's bad attitude ruin the whole night. Are you with me?" The audience roared their approval. "Brilliant," Jonathan said, clapping his hands together. "Absolutely brilliant. Right then, let's get back to it, shall we?" But even as the show continued, even as Jonathan brought out his next guest and everyone tried to move forward, the moment hung in the air. What had just happened would be talked about for days, weeks, months. The moment a talk show host said no. The moment someone stood up to entitlement and won. Because here's what made it so powerful, so memorable. It wasn't about the prince. Not really. It was about something bigger. It was about the idea that respect is earned, not given. That titles don't make you better than anyone else. That how you treat people, especially people you think are beneath you, reveals your true character. Jonathan had given Harry every chance. He'd been welcoming, patient, professional. He'd tried to steer the conversation back on track multiple times. But Harry had made his choice. He'd chosen to be dismissive, to be rude, to act like the rules didn't apply to him. And Jonathan had made his choice too, to say enough is enough. The rest of the show went smoothly. The other guests were lovely. The music was great. The audience was energized in a way they might not have been otherwise. There was something electric in the air, something that happens when people witness someone standing up for what's right. When the show ended and the cameras stopped rolling, Jonathan sat in his chair for a moment, alone on the stage. The audience had filed out. The crew was packing up, and he just sat there, processing what had happened. His producer came over, put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said. Jonathan nodded. "I know. Doesn't make it any easier, though, does it?" "No," she agreed. "But that's how you know it mattered." And it did matter. Because what happened in that studio wasn't just about one bad interview. It was a reminder that everyone, no matter who they are, needs to treat others with dignity and respect. It was a reminder that standing up for yourself isn't rude or unprofessional. Sometimes it's the most professional thing you can do. Jonathan had spent years being kind to his guests, making them comfortable, drawing out their best stories. But kindness doesn't mean being a doormat. Kindness doesn't mean accepting abuse. And when Harry crossed that line, when he made it clear that he thought he was too good for the show, too good for the audience, too good for basic human decency, Jonathan did what had to be done. He asked him to leave, and in doing so, he showed everyone watching that respect is a two-way street. That fame and titles and family names don't give you the right to treat people poorly. That at the end of the day, we're all just people, and we all deserve to be treated with kindness. The moment Harry walked off that stage, something changed. Not just in the studio, but in how people thought about celebrity interviews, about power dynamics, about what we're willing to accept from people just because of who they are. Jonathan Ross didn't set out to make a statement that night. He just set out to do his job, to have a good conversation, to make people laugh. But when his guest refused to meet him halfway, when his guest decided that being respectful was beneath him, Jonathan made a choice to stand up for himself, for his crew, for his audience, for anyone who's ever been made to feel small by someone who thought they were important. And that choice, that moment, that 37 seconds when everything changed, became the most talked about television moment of the year. Not because of what Harry said or did, but because of what Jonathan said and did. Because he drew a line. Because he said no. Because he reminded everyone that respect isn't optional. It's essential. The studio was dark now, empty and quiet. But what had happened there would echo far beyond those walls. It would be replayed, discussed, debated. Some would say Jonathan was right. Some would say he went too far. But everyone would remember the moment when a talk show host looked a prince in the eye and said, "Not here, not on my stage, not to my people." That was the moment Harry learned that titles don't protect you from consequences. That being royal doesn't make you right. That if you can't show basic respect to the people around you, eventually someone will stand up and say, "Enough." And Jonathan Ross was that someone. The lights in the studio finally went out. But the impact of what happened there would shine bright for a long time to come. Because sometimes, the most important moments aren't the ones we plan. They're the ones that happen when someone finally says, "This stops now." And it did stop. Right there, in that moment, with those words, "Please leave my stage." That's where it ended. That's where Harry's entitled attitude met someone who wouldn't tolerate it. That's where respect won over royalty. That's where a talk show host became a hero to everyone who's ever been talked down to, dismissed, or made to feel less than. Jonathan didn't need a crown to have dignity. He didn't need a title to command respect. He just needed to know his worth and to stand up for what was right. And that night, in front of millions of viewers, he did exactly that.